regularly about you guys, and most of it's good, I think. John will tell you otherwise. No, it's a real privilege to be able to have John share the stage with us this morning and to share a little bit about dads, because we all need to hear about God of our Father. John's also in this stage of his life and ministry is moving into a time where he's able to use more wisdom to invest into people, and so John's keeps working, and so he's developing a leadership pipeline for churches to be able to help them. So you'll hear more about John's work in the months ahead, probably into next year. But really exciting that John's able to develop and keep on pushing through developing leaders, because we know we need great leaders, and great dads are great leaders. So I look forward to what John has to share with us this morning. Would you give John a Kruger kind of level round of applause for it?
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Matt. It's good to be back. I'm a grandfather. We have 8 grandkids, between 3 and 12. I must admit, as a grandfather, I've got severe limitations. I'm only good for an hour. I minded our youngest one a few weeks ago, and his mother said 3 hours she'd be away for. The first hour was really good. The next 2 hours, I was looking at my watch every 5 minutes and saying, and she took another hour extra. It was 4 hours. I'm not real safe when I'm minding the grandkids. One of our grandkids, when he was 1, next picture, let's see. Yeah, there he is. I was minding him and took him round to a friend's place that had a pool. She wasn't around. The place was all locked up, but the pool was fine. So I went round, we had a swim and all the rest. Anyway, somewhere when I was looking after him and obviously not watching him, he crawled through the doggy door into the locked up house. So I was outside trying to work out. He's chasing this dog around inside the house. And I'm thinking, I can't get in there. What am I going to do? What's my wife going to say? Anyway, so they still let me look after the kids occasionally. I do spoil them. I love giving them lollies and all the rest. And then this week I gave lollies to our youngest one and said, don't you tell your mum about that. So she came to the car when I dropped him home. First thing he says, Mummy, Grandpa gave me lollies. Anyway, but I try to show my grandkids that they're loved, and I do pray for them regularly, and try to just show that no matter what they do, that I'm solid and I'm committed to them, and I love them intensely. So I do okay with our grandkids. When we're in Brisbane, we live with 4 of our grandkids in the house. But to be honest, I think I've loved being a dad even more than being a grandfather. It's more challenging, that's for sure. There's more pressure, greater responsibility, a lot more pain at times. But it's a privilege being a dad, in part, protecting your kids, loving them, serving them, disciplining them, teaching them. And then as time goes on, at this stage of life, still trying to mentor them and help them grow and develop. Go on to the next slide. There I am with one of my boys now. It's a huge part of life, and I know that not everyone gets the privilege of being a parent. I realise that, and there's many other things that God wants us to do that are important in life. But if you are a parent, it's just such an important part of life. And I've not fathered girls, so I don't know what that's like. That must be interesting. I was my wife's sister. Her dad died at 40, and so when my wife's sister got married, I got the opportunity of walking down the aisle. And so here I was. Do you know what I mean? This is my big chance in life, because it's never going to happen for me. So we were at her place, got into the car and driving to the church. And so I'm thinking, this is a really big moment, and I said to her, I said, Rachel, this is a really, really important commitment you're making now. And I thought, this is the big moment for me. And she looked at me and said, shut up, John, I'm nervous enough as it is. So that didn't quite work out as well as I hoped it would. My own dad passed away 8 years ago, but he was a very generous father. He loved doing things for us, not practical stuff. He was hopeless practically, but he loved helping us. Both myself and my brother have been pastors, and he worked in both of our churches for quite a period of time, supporting us, standing with us. He was a businessman, but very good in management and administration, all of those areas. In his last few years of life, it got a bit tougher for him because he couldn't offer so much, and he found that very, very, very difficult. But I remember at the funeral, they said nice things about him and all, but the family was up on stage, and the kids, that was us, and then the grandkids, and then the great-grandkids. And I just looked at all those people and I thought, what a tremendous privilege Dad's had, being such an influence for so many generations. It really is incredible. What a privilege. Well, maybe you don't identify with any of that. It's not your experience. You might be estranged from your dad, or you've got a distant father, or you don't enjoy being a parent, or you've got difficult children, and I realise all of those things are true for some people. So let me talk this morning not so much about me being a dad, although I'll mention my father a little bit later on, but I want to particularly talk about what it is having God as our dad. The idea of God as Father is very familiar to us. We've got the Lord's Prayer, our Father who is in heaven. And we've already sung some songs that talked about God as Father. Most of us use, when we're addressing God, we use the term Father. And it seems very natural for us. There's few of us that would be uncomfortable calling God Father. But the fact is, in the Old Testament, the word Father is hardly ever used of God. The word Father is used 1,200 times in the Old Testament, so there's a lot of fathers. Only used 15 times for God. So it's very rare to call God Father. And there was a good reason for that, because the Israelites had this tremendous respect for God. He was holy, he was separate, he was awesome, he was perfect. You know what I mean? Like, he was absolutely incredible, and you wouldn't call God Father. In fact, by about the year 200 BC, the Israelites were so uncomfortable calling God in any intimate way that they wouldn't even say the name God or Yahweh or whatever it was. They wouldn't even say that name. And so we don't really know. The Hebrews only got consonants in it. So all we know is the consonants. We don't, because no one has said the word God, we don't really know what it is. If we go on to the next slide, I think. Oh no, sorry, I'm jumping ahead here. Yeah, there it is, that's it. You've got to read Hebrew backwards, all right, or right to left, all right? So YHWH or JHWH or JHVH. We know that's the word that the Hebrews used for God. Can you see how Jehovah and Yahweh, we sang a song with Jehovah in it at the start. And so it just depends on what vowels you put in there as to what word you get. And scholars mainly think it was Yahweh, that was what it was. But we're not quite sure, and that's why some still use Jehovah. But the reason we don't know is because the Jews won't speak the name God. They won't write the name God even from about 200 BC. And so, and the reason was that they just respected God so deeply. He was so incredible. He was holy, which just means he was separate. He was different. You wouldn't be intimate with God. And so when the term Father was used in the Bible, in the Old Testament, it wasn't used for a personal father, a personal God who's father of it. It was father of the nation of Israel, or father of the king of Israel, So it was a more distant term, kind of like a patriarch in a sense, some sort of honoured head of the family, some sort of protector. It was a term of respect, father. Never used of ordinary individuals. So it's like, I guess we would term, in some denominations anyway, we'd use the term father as a respected term for a pastor. I remember when I was young and had lots of long hair when I was first started pastoring, I was sitting getting my car tyres changed. And the guy who was changing the tyres was talking to me. We were chatting and he was telling me all sorts of stories and swearing all the time and all the rest. And finally he said to me, "Hey mate, what do you do for a living?" I said, "Well, actually I'm a minister of religion." And his face went white, He said, "Oh, sorry, Father. I mow the lawn at the Catholic Church." But in that sort of term, father, do you know what I mean? Sort of like respectful, protector, but more distant. And that's the way that it was used in the Bible. And that's a wonderful way to see God, as our patriarch, isn't it? As our protector, as our supporter, as our provider. And if you're a Christian, then the sovereign God, the holy God, the perfect God, is your father. And that's what we've been celebrating this morning. And most of us are very comfortable with that idea. We've used that term for father, for our God. We find it less threatening than the Israelites did using terms like that, because we really feel that we can describe him as father. There's a greater closeness than what the Israelites would have felt in the Old Testament at least. So when Jesus entered our world, I've got a little teaching about language here. When Jesus entered our world, Aramaic was the language that was spoken in Israel. So the thing is, the Bible is written mainly in Greek. The New Testament is mainly written in Greek. And so when they wrote down what Jesus said or things about Jesus, they were translating from Aramaic to Greek, because Jesus would have said it in Aramaic. Does that make sense? So in the Aramaic language, which we know a little bit about, in the Aramaic language there was a word for father or for dad, which was Abba. And the word for mum was Imma. And so those words come, and in all languages there's words for father or dad, do you know what I mean? And they're intimate words, and they usually are words that have come from children's babbling. Do you know what I mean? What they can most easily say, this is what we got. So, a kid goes, dad, 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 dad. Oh, there's dad. He's talking about me, or mum, 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 or Imma, or abba, 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 abba. Do you know what I mean? So it was sort of mumblings of a little child is how you get your word, because that's what they can say. And so our word for dad, or Abba in the Aramaic, is a close term. Like, you don't use your word dad for anyone much except one person. I remember when we got married, my wife, her dad was still alive then, and she said, "I can't call your dad Dad, I'm going to call him Father." So she always used the word father of my dad, because she only felt she had one dad. Some of my daughters-in-law call me Dad, and some of them don't call me anything, so it just depends. But we usually keep the word dad for that really close personal relationship. Nowhere in Jewish writing was the word dad ever used for Yahweh. Like, a pious, respectful Jew would never use that word dad for God. And I think we can understand that. A father is kind of more a respectful term than dad. There's a huge danger of a kind of a flippant relationship with a holy God. God is to be respected. Maybe like a good principal of a school. You wouldn't go up and say, "Hey mate," it's a respectful term. And so the Jews would never use the word dad, Abba, for God. Of course not. So when Jesus prayed to God, what term did he use for God? As I said, the New Testament's written in Greek, not Aramaic, so we can't be sure. But there is a clue in Matthew 26:42. So let's have a look at this passage. There it is. In Matthew 26:42, in Matthew it says, this is Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. He went away a second time and prayed, "My Father, if it's not possible for this cup to be taken away unless I drink it, may your will be done." All right, so that's in the Greek. It says, "My Father." In Mark's version of it, same situation, same prayer, it says, "Abba, Father," he said, "everything's possible for you. Take this cup from me, yet not what I will, but what you will." In other words, Mark's trying to get across here that he slips in a bit of Aramaic into the Greek and says, well, when Jesus was praying, how did he refer to God? Well, it's "my Father" in the Greek, but it was actually Abba, Dad. Please don't let this, may I not have to go through with what lies ahead of me. So when most scholars agree that when Jesus' words are translated, "my Father," from the Greek, he's actually using the Aramaic Abba, Dad. Can you imagine how the Jewish leaders were so offended? Like how horrific for some person, some human, to be addressing God as Dad. You just wouldn't do that. What a horrible trivialization of God to call him Dad. But we can understand, can't we? Like, this is the love, intimate language of the Trinity. You know, they've always been three in one. And so Jesus referring to God as Dad is to be expected. Just as God said, you know, "my son in whom I am well pleased," you know, "my boy." Oh yes, Dad. Like that's the Trinity. That's what you expect within the Trinity. This incredibly close, intimate relationship. So when Jesus taught his disciples to pray, how did he teach them to address God? Well, Luke 11:2, he said to them, "When you pray, say, 'Father, hallowed be your name, your kingdom come.'" Almost certainly, when Jesus taught his disciples in Aramaic, he uses the word Abba there. Jesus gave us direction to address God as Dad. When you pray, "Dad, hallowed be your name, your kingdom come." This is not just for Jesus, but for his brothers and sisters. That's us, if you're a follower of Jesus. Like he said, when you pray, say Dad. God is not only a protector, a patriarch, a beautiful father, but also an intimate dad, a close, caring dad. And so Jesus said, talk to your dad like that. But could they do it? Like, these are good Jewish boys. Like, you know, they grow up with this incredible respect and honour for God. Like, could they ever address God as, "Hey, Dad, may your name be hallowed or set apart"? Could they ever do that? You bet your boots they did. Let's have a look. Listen to Paul in Romans 8. "For those who are led by the Spirit of God are the children of God. The Spirit you receive does not make you slaves so that you live in fear again. Rather, the Spirit you received brought about your adoption to sonship." You've been adopted. "And by him we cry," what is it? "Abba, Father." You slipped in the Aramaic again. Abba, Father. Verse 17, "Now if we're children, then we're heirs." Like, everything that God has is going to be ours. Heirs of God and co-heirs with Christ. So these New Testament Christians, as the Spirit came into them, it enabled them, because God's living in them, to say, "Dad," when they're praying. God says, you're in the family now. Look at Galatians 4 verse 6. "Because we are children, God sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, the Spirit who calls out, 'Abba, Father.'" This is so important that the Aramaic slips in there just to make sure you understand what he's saying here. He's saying Dad. And so God says, you're in the family now. You're part of the family. You've been adopted. I've chosen you. I've seen what you're like, and I've called you into my family, and you're a kid, one of my kids now. Call me Dad. Let me be your dad. And he offers to us not just a good relationship, not just a respectful relationship, but an intimate relationship, a deeply close family relationship. He's our dad. And that's how the New Testament, both Christians, both Jewish and Gentile, saw God. They saw him as Abba. So how are you going with that? Now, I don't want to get hung up on the name, the word dad. Maybe some of you would never feel free to call God Dad. But the idea of it is that this is far more than just a relationship. This is a close, intimate, deep, loving, beautiful relationship that God calls us into. And what stops us from having that kind of relationship with God? Well, let me just go through a couple of things. One is respect. Some of us say, well, look, I respect God. He's holy, he's different, he's separate. And over-familiarity breeds contempt. God is worthy of our respect, of our fear, and that is certainly true. I'm not trying to downplay that at all. God is holy. He is perfect, he's beautiful, he's all-powerful, and all of that, do you know what I mean? And we need to respect him and fear in a good way. You know, we need that. That's very, very important to us. God is transcendent. And much of our worship is about the beauty and the greatness of God, which is very important for us to do, to say to God how great he is. But the biblical invitation is to go further than that and see ourselves in this intimate relationship with God, with a dad that loves us absolutely intensely. And that's what God calls us into, as if we belong to him. This is what he calls us into. Another reason why we find it difficult is our sense of unworthiness. You know, how could I be that close to God? Like, I'm so broken, I mess things up all the time. And that's certainly true. Certainly true of me, so I guess it's true of all of us, you know, that we're so far short of what we would love to be and what we think God expects of us. I know that. But the fact is, God saw us just the way we were. And out of the worst of us, he saw all of that and he decided to adopt us into his family. He made the choice. He made the call. He said, I'm calling you. I'm making you my child. And so God has made that call and he has adopted us. And so as part of his family, yes, we are still very broken people till Jesus comes again. I realise that. But God has said, I want you with all your mess and muck and wrongness and weakness and all the rest. I want you. I'm adopting you. Call me Dad. Sometimes it's a lack of experience. Maybe some of us have not had father-type figures in our lives that we can actually rely on and that will care for us. And so sometimes it's a lack of experience. Sometimes it's a lack of filling with the Spirit, because it's the Spirit in us particularly that cries out Dad, that enables us to have this intense, intimate relationship with God. And so we need to pray. You know, be constantly filled with the Spirit. You know, Spirit, you do your work in me. Help me to understand who God is and what he means in relationship with me. So it's important to appreciate and honour God as Father, as a patriarch, as someone to be respected and adored and appreciated. But that's not the end of it. You've also been invited with the help of the Spirit to see God, to relate to God as an intimate dad. Let me just finish with a couple of stories about my dad, just to illustrate what dads do, good dads do. My dad was far from perfect, I know that. But let me just tell a couple of things. One is, good dads are really caring. My dad, when we got to our sort of late teenage years, we were asserting our independence and all the rest. My dad could not go to sleep at night till we came home. And I remember one night I came home and I was so tired, I just fell asleep in the car. Dad didn't sleep a wink that night because he was so worried that I hadn't come home. And God as Dad, that's what he does. He just cares that deeply for you. He really is watching you all the time. Incredibly, incredibly. You're special to him, you know. My dad was always wanting to bless us. As we grew and got our own families and all the rest, we usually drove fairly oldish cars. And when we'd go away on holidays as a family, Dad would always say, take my car. And he always had new cars that were really nice cars. And so he said, take my car on holidays. And we always did too. It was great. Don't make the same offer to my kids. And God's like that. Do you know what I mean? Like God just wants to help. He loves to bless you. He really does. He loves to bless you. Dad was incredibly proud of us. He was a businessman and quite high up in business. And at one stage he was talking to another business guy. And the business guy asked him, what do your kids do? And he said, well, my two sons are pastors. And the other guy said, oh, I'm sorry about that. And Dad said, no, I think it's absolutely wonderful. He was incredibly proud of us. And I know we often don't feel that, but God is incredibly proud of you. He really is. He just thinks you're the bee's knees. He really does. Loves you that much. So it's important for us to have this understanding. Whether we use the word dad or not doesn't really matter, but this understanding of God as this intimate dad for us. A couple of stories just to finish with. When I lost one of my boys, when he was about 11, we were skiing, and I was teaching the kids to ski. There was the middle boy. So he was about 11 in that photo, but he looked about 7, you know. So he was very small, very tiny. And with Perisher, I was teaching him to ski all day, and I let him go do the last run into Perisher in the afternoon. I said, do it by yourself. I'm not. Anyway, I got down there. Dan was down there, and I was waiting. It was getting darker, and Alex didn't come. And I was terrified of what Dad was going to do to me. That's what I was terrified of, you know, losing a son on the ski fields, you know. And but as I sat there and the last skiers were skiing down, it was getting dark, and I knew my little boy was out there on the field somewhere, a snowfield somewhere, waiting for his dad to come, and I couldn't come because I didn't have a clue where he was. And I prayed at that point and said, God, I don't know where he is. You know where he is. You're his dad. You look after him. And it had a good ending. There was a cross country. He was skied to the side and into the trees. There was a cross country skier coming in that night. Saw this little bundle of red in the snow and went over, and it was my son, and found him and brought him back. And the truth is that God is there. I mean, the incredible thing, we already talked about it this morning, but just our dad is always there, always care, always watching. Before you got up this morning, God was thinking about you. Thinking about you. Like, God is very, very caring. But also in this intimate relationship with God, not only is it's not one-sided. Like, God really loves it when we appreciate him too as our dad. We've got a park just down the road for us, and it's got one of those roundabout swings. That's an old style one. They're a little bit safer than these days. But anyway, when I was bringing up our kids, our youngest boy was about 5 at the time. I was at a park with him, and there was one of these roundabout things. And there was a few kids already on it. And Zach said, could I go have a go on the roundabout? And the kids that were on it looked pretty rough. Oh, shouldn't say that, do you know what I mean? But they looked a little bit worrisome, you know. And I thought, so I went over there and said, yeah, you can get on. But I stood there close by just to make sure he's going to be all right. And these little kids, probably a bit older than that, probably about 8 or so, were taking this roundabout round. And I thought, I'll give them a bit of a thrill here. So I was a fair bit younger in those days. So I grabbed hold of this roundabout and I ran as fast as I could. And there were kids flying everywhere. Like, it was just fantastic. Anyway, finally I got exhausted and stopped and sort of stood there. And these little kids on the thing was like, who is that? Who is that? And my little 5-year-old said, that's my dad. And God just loves that when we say, that's my dad. I love that. Like, we see something that he does, or we look at his creation, or we sense his presence, and we say, that's my dad. It's not a one-way relationship, it's two-way, where he cares for us. But we respond in saying, that's my dad. I love it that you're my dad. Let's pray, hey? Dad, we love you heaps, and we thank you that you love us even more than we love you. And I just pray today that we might appreciate that in a fresh way, that we might enjoy your presence with us, your care for us, your generosity towards us, your deep concern for us, your fact that you're so proud of us. You've called us into your family, and we're your kids, we're your heirs with Jesus. And so, Lord, may the reality of that touch our hearts in even deeper ways this day, I pray in your name.